The definition of conviction is a firmly held belief. Leadership looks different for each person, but every leader has strong convictions that pave the way for how they guide their people. Whether you're an experienced leader, a current leader, a novice leader, or a soon-to-be leader, this podcast is a must for you. Through this show, you will hear leaders share their convictions, the struggles they face, and the challenges they have overcome by staying true to their convictions. Leadership can be hard and it can be lonely. I aim to connect you with leaders who have walked the journey and want to show others the way. This is Beau Vincent, and you're listening to The Conviction of a Leader. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to The Conviction of a Leader. I am so excited because I actually have a really good friend, Andrew Filar. What is up, and welcome to The Conviction of a Leader. You know, I hope I sound as cool as I think I sound when I talk like that, but I won't let you respond because you're brutally honest sometimes. No, I really am thankful that you could jump on here. I want to introduce you to all the listeners out there. Thank you for joining us today. Once again, we have Andrew Filar, who is the CEO of Peachy Insurance Agency. He also is one of the co-founders. He also is a co-founder of Next Call Club, which is a business that is more about professional services that help agencies, insurance agencies specifically, grow with new business acquisition. Andrew is also married to Candace, and I won't call her Candy because I do know that does not make her happy, but we will say Candace, and he's been married for several years, somewhere around the 4-year mark. But welcome to The Conviction of a Leader, Andrew. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Beau.
No, I'm thankful that you are here today.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm bringing agents onto the podcast. You know, we've talked about this in the past. This is season
Sure.
2. We didn't get an opportunity to get you on season 1. Both of our paths were just so busy. But Andrew and I are excited because we have something fun coming up really soon. And we could start there. Andrew and I met in
Sure.
Durango with a little
We
group.
did.
And what would you call that group? A little mastermind? What would you call that?
Yeah,
Friends?
I think maybe like a master. I think maybe started as a mastermind, turned into
Yeah.
friends, and now, almost sometimes a therapy support group, right?
Yeah.
A place to share our wins and vent our frustrations, right?
I would say so. We're blessed to. We call it C8, which is 8 different individuals. We've come together. We're doing a summit, and it's going to be different than most of what Andrew and I've been to. Andrew, you know, you might be one of the only persons I'm going to be talking to that goes to is more conferences than me. So, I mean, how many do you think you've been to in the last, 2 years? If you had to
In the
guess.
last two
Yeah.
years, 20 plus easily.
Oh man.
I kind of joke that we're on the circuit. It's
Hmm.
like we're on the event circuit. We see all the same vendors and crowds, and it's like they've kind of become friends. It's you see everybody in the vendor room, and you're like, hey, look who it is. So it's been a lot, but it's been really good. I've gotten to meet a lot of really great people, and I imagine you feel the same
Oh,
way.
dude. I mean, if the relationships that you get to build when you see people at a conference and then you get one-on-one, it's not as much about, being a
Right.
presenter or not being a presenter or being a vendor. It's really the one-on-one time and networking you get with so many different business owners and entrepreneurs across America. I mean, for real, you've been everywhere. I mean, and I love that. I've seen you. I saw you last year, Scottsdale. I feel
Yep.
Chicago, maybe Vegas. I mean, I don't know.
Nashville.
Nashville. So all over
Yeah.
the place. But,
Yeah.
once again, thanks for joining the show. Andrew, you have a
Absolutely.
really unique journey with your leadership, like where you started and where you're at today. Now, when we get to where you're at today, I want to talk a little bit more about last year's results and this year's
Sure.
results, but I want you to kind of explain your leadership path and where it started and why it's unique as I speak it as it is.
Yeah, I'll absolutely walk through the path of, how I developed into a leader, and I would say it's been a reluctant journey.
Yeah.
When I first, got into the insurance industry, I came right out of college. I had studied finance and economics, and I knew I didn't want to do wealth management.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to work on Wall Street. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and so I took a job producing at State Farm. And you know, my goal there was to cold call a lot of businesses and try to get business owners or the office managers to let us quote their commercial
Right.
auto insurance. And that sucked. It was super hard. uh, but I eventually got my licenses, moved on to a full-blown licensed producer role, started working leads, and was a salesperson, and I actually loved that. I think the challenge for me though was that I when I was 22 or 23 years old, I didn't have the, I think, emotional maturity to know when to turn it off. And so all I did was work, work, work because I was on a commission based
I
comp plan.
see.
And so, as the more you worked, the more money you made,
Right.
assuming you got results. And so what happened is after 18 or 20 months, I burned out pretty
Yeah.
spectacularly. And I said, look, this isn't for me. I was making more money than I ever thought that I would, especially at 23 or
Yeah.
24 years
Only a
old.
couple years out of
And
college. Awesome.
I was making like $14,000 a month, and
Dang.
my bills were $1,500. So it was a cool
Oh,
time,
yeah.
in my life. And so I burned out, and I remember getting recruited by the largest captive agency in the country, and I was basically sold an opportunity to come in and be a producer. And I said, you know what, fine, I'm going to open an agency at some point, anyways, and I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to keep learning and growing and recover a little bit.
Can we talk? Can I
And
ask a question along the way?
yeah,
How
sure.
big was this captive agent that you went to work for? Do you remember?
Around 70
Okay,
million
I think it's important.
in 2015.
2015.
Yeah,
So when I want you to
yeah,
make sure to hit those points when you leave that captive, I want to know how big
for
it
sure.
was. But go ahead.
Yeah, so around 70 million, give or take 2 million,
Okay.
on any given year depending
Of
on the
course.
market. It was in Florida, and so there's a
A lot
lot
of
of
flux.
volatility, as
Yeah.
as we all know. And I was there about a month or two and kind of got thrust into a sales management role. And it wasn't my goal, it wasn't really what I wanted to do. But I was asked to do it, and it's what the organization needed. And so that's what started the leadership journey. And I think it was incredibly hard because I was this 23, 24-year-old kid, for lack of a better term. And I was managing people who were 10, 15, 20 years older than
Oh
I
yeah.
was, who were working for the top agent in the country. And all of a sudden they said, well, Andrew's going to be your new boss. And we're not going to do anything on like direct mail or legacy marketing anymore where they call you. Now you have to pick up the phone and make outbound calls to people, you know, who
Oh,
don't want to talk to you.
right.
And so you can imagine how well that went
Oh
over. And
yeah.
so I got a lot of lessons from the school of hard knocks that first year or two, learning how do I get people to move in the direction that we need them to do, even though I might not have enough authority to do it. So I had explicit authority of a job title, but not necessarily the respect or the clout or the track record yet as a leader. And so that was a huge challenge, but I never moved back into an individual contributor role after that. So in 2016, when I became a manager, I have just not, there's not been a time since then that I have not been a leader or manager in a formal sense since then.
Nice.
And so
Awesome.
that's, I think, the start of the journey. And then over the last, geez, man, we're getting old, eight
Yeah.
years,
Whew.
over the last 8 years, it's been pretty cool. I think with, helping change that original captive agency that I worked for to opening an agency of my own and building that up. And
Yeah.
what I'll say is that I'm extremely blessed to have three other people who that I work with directly
Yeah. You
that
do.
I consider like our executive team, and they're all just so incredible. And I've worked with all of them for 7, 8, 9 plus years, and so it makes being a leader easy when you have people like that around you.
I'd say it does change the dynamic, right? Because a lot of like
Absolutely,
insurance based owners, agencies tend to be lone wolves, right? At least inside
absolutely,
of their own business.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
you finished up and you started your own. You said with two other people. Is that what it is?
Two other
Okay,
people.
so
Yep, two
I
other
love it.
people.
So it's like a three-legged dog, which could still run. I'm just kidding.
We prefer the three heads of the
Three
dragon,
heads. I like
Beau
that.
Vincent.
I like that.
Yes.
So And I know your other two like co-founders, and I can speak to the
Yeah,
listeners on them. I mean, these are top-notch guys. These aren't slacks that I guess worked their way into Andrew's heart or paid their way into it. They have earned it. They are hard workers, respectable
absolutely.
business uh, owners, and the way that they run their business is awesome because I'm actually a customer of one of your businesses because of how
Yeah,
much I and honestly, we took that path. It took us a while because we're such
it
good
did.
friends. I think you waited for me more than anything to ask about it, and I did, and I respect that.
Absolutely.
And now
Yeah,
I'll tell you, I can speak from a friend side, business professional, but also a customer now. And I can tell you that, and listeners, listen, Andrew runs his business the way he does. And I have this saying, Andrew, you probably heard me say this: your stage life cannot be bigger than your real life. And you are
for
one of
sure.
those guys that everything you say, speak, actually lines up. I can vouch for you, and I value that in
Well,
a
thanks for saying.
friendship. So, Andrew, so you ended this relationship as you
I
started a
did.
new one. Where did this captive agent end after, was it how many years from start to
So
finish?
I was there 8
8
years,
years
and
total. Okay.
it's a little hard to track sometimes because I had a unique opportunity
Right.
that we opened the Atlanta Peachy Insurance, the
Yes.
Atlanta-based agency, about halfway through the tenure of working for this large Florida captive agency, and it was a unique opportunity to say, "Look, we'll continue to run this large captive agency, but then open a brand new agency that's a separate entity over on the side." So that was an amazing opportunity because what it did was it allowed me to take a salary to run somebody else's
Yeah.
agency, and same thing with my partners to take a salary to run somebody else's agency, add value over there, but that allowed us to save all that cash that we'd have to pay
Yeah.
ourselves to reinvest it back in the business. And that's what we did for the first 5 years. And so when we left, we operated the two businesses as one large
I
business. I
see.
believe and it's been a couple years now, but I think at the captive agent got up to about 75 million and then dropped back down to around 71 or 72. We in Atlanta were 25, 26,
So,
somewhere in that range. We were 1 or 2
oh
million shy of
geez.
100 million because we operated them as one large agency. They were on separate income statement, profit and loss statements, two separate entities. However, we got synergies by sharing operational
Yeah.
staff, by sharing technology platforms to get price breaks, and it was a huge win. So I think at the height it was
Yeah.
98 million when you combine the two
Whew.
entities, and I think we had 105 employees. And so that was a hell of an experience for me to be at the helm of that. And,
So,
how do you operate an agency with 105 employees and keep it
I
running
mean,
smoothly?
in the insurance world, that's, I mean, especially captive, right? But let's just say
For sure.
insurance world in general, 100 employees, not really heard of. So
Right.
explain the details a little bit more for me and the listeners. You were
Sure.
in Peachy in Georgia,
Yep.
but you were still leading Florida, correct?
I was, yeah. So I operated as the CEO of both companies.
Nice.
So I was the COO for a bit and then moved into the CEO role. And basically, the idea there was to treat it almost like we had an operational staff that was like a holding company.
Right.
That's not what it was by any means. I don't want to misrepresent that at all. But we had one, large executive team,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had like Florida leaders, and then
Yeah.
we had Georgia leaders, and then they would share resources as needed or to help each other out. And so I left that large captive agency at the end of 2022,
Yeah.
and part of the reason was it had just kind of run its course. Our agency had just gotten up to a very respectable revenue number.
Oh,
We had
yeah.
gotten our second scratch contract with the carrier that we work with, which if anybody out there who's listening has had a scratch contract on the insurance side, it's like jet fuel,
It
honestly. and
really
and I
is.
and I consider getting a second scratch contract in Georgia to be one of the luckiest breaks that I've gotten in my life. And I always tell people, yes, we worked really hard to earn that opportunity. We also got lucky that it became available
Oh,
because there
yeah.
was only one or two of those contracts left in the entire country. So it was just time. We had a lot to do. I was
Mm-hmm.
starting Next Call Club with some other people, and I couldn't go from having two jobs to three jobs.
Right.
And so, the relationship had run its course. We left. It's all kumbaya, and that's where we are today. So that was end of 2022. It's hard to believe it's been 15 or 16
Yeah.
months, but we haven't looked back. Peachy Insurance is sitting at around 38 million
Whew.
today. And, because of the unique nature of the insurance industry, we're growing at just a stupid rate.
Yeah. Let's
And
talk about that for a
and
second.
then
Within the
yeah,
carrier, where did you rank last year? I mean, I know, but I'd like the listeners to hear. I've seen where I think you might have landed,
yeah.
but where did you land
You
last
know,
year? Do you know?
I don't know where I landed on the big board.
Okay.
It's a little bit ambiguous because I didn't qualify for our year-end bonus trips because I had a loss ratio, and so that was one of
Mm.
the qualifiers. My loss ratio was about 2% too
Do me a
high,
favor,
which
explain that to our non-insurance listeners. What is a loss
yeah. So
ratio?
to our non-insurance listeners, every insurance company operates on something called a combined ratio. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out how much money do they have to pay out for every dollar that they take in. So part of that is claims, part of that is managerial expenses, part of that's marketing, yada yada yada. So basically this idea is that in the last few years the combined ratio has been over 100%, which means that the insurance company is
Paid.
taking in less money than they're spending,
Right.
whether that's on claims or people or whatever. And so that's why we're seeing rate increases on home and auto insurance and commercial insurance
Hmm.
and pretty much every type of insurance all across
Right.
the country because they have to get more rates out of the customers to try to get profitable again.
Yeah.
And the in order to do that, a lot of the companies out there, a lot of the carriers, not just ours, are instituting a loss ratio requirement. So basically, they want to see that, I'm just going to call it say I'm going to use an example of say it was 50%,
Yeah.
right? Ours is significantly higher than that, but let's say it was 50%. It
Hmm.
means that if you take in a dollar of premium from a customer, they want to pay out no less than 50 cents in claims. And so we had a threshold to go into. I was 2% too high. And so I missed what they call agency achievement.
Ah.
From a new business or new client acquisition standpoint, I think I ended around fifth or sixth in the country out of, I think there's 6,000 agents
Yeah.
or maybe
I
5,500
it's
agents or something like
somewhere
that now.
between 55 to 65. They don't give us the number, but which is
Yeah. So
still ridiculously good.
yeah, so I think I was 5th or 6th, somewhere in that
Right.
range, and it was a great year, and there's a couple people who were ahead of me that, run incredible shops, and I
Yes.
hope that you can get on this
Yeah,
podcast
right.
too, so,
I actually I have a couple lined up already. One of them will never
yeah.
do one ever. If you know who he is, he says that's just not my thing. He's like, that's your
Yeah,
thing. I
I'm
don't go to
guessing.
conferences and talk.
Yeah,
So, but I love your journey because it was different. And I want to ask you this question because there's people that are listening that have not
sure.
taken the step as an entrepreneur that they want to take. And a lot of advice they get is wait till you can do it alone. Now, I want to ask you that. What do you think about that advice? If you ever heard anybody say, don't start till you could start on your own, where you've done it slightly different, what advice would you give to somebody who's waiting till they can afford to do it or have the, I guess, experience on their own?
So, it's a really interesting question that I've not heard asked before, and you and I have talked about how I feel about having partners.
Yeah.
Some people don't want a partner, or they say, "Look, maybe one partner at most."
Yeah.
I've had 2 partners and pretty much I've had at least one partner, most of the time 2 partners in everything that I've done, from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And people sometimes say that's crazy. How do you
Yeah.
manage that? And the reality is that it all comes back to trust and communication and
True.
mutual respect. And if somebody wants to wait until they can do it on their own, I would, instead of telling them something, I'd ask them a question and say, what is the reason that you want to do it on your
Mm.
own? And I've talked to people about that before. I've gotten a lot of advice from family who say, "Look, you need to do it on your own. You need to do it on your own." And I think where a lot of that comes from my experience of talking to people, is that it comes from a place of fear
Yeah.
or mistrust.
Mm.
There's a fear that, look, someone, if you're not watching the book, someone's going to steal the money. If you don't have your contract laid out perfectly, like, you're going to get screwed. All those things can and do happen
Yes.
all
Yeah.
of the time, right? So I'm not going to minimize that in any way, shape, or form, but that's why it's so important. One of my business partners, Danny, talks about this a lot. He said he got really great advice in college. He went through an entrepreneurial program, and they basically said you want to make sure you have 3 pieces of professional counsel that are
Mm.
really, really good.
Yep.
You want to have a really great attorney. you want a really great CPA, and you want to have a really great real estate agent. And I can say that we have a really great attorney, and we have a really great CPA that as we've built these companies, we've put operating agreements in
Mm.
place and we've amended those operating agreements. And the CPA and attorney have been incredibly helpful in building those operating agreements out with these almost interviews or
Yeah.
questionnaires to say, how are you going to handle this? How are you going to handle that? Do you want to codify that in the operating agreement? Do you want to take that as it comes? And something that I learned very recently is that an operating agreement is not the US Constitution, right?
It
Like
can be
and
reworked.
and and it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it can't change. And you can change the US Constitution, but we haven't had a change to the Constitution in over 100 years, or don't
Don't
around
fact
100
check
years.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, don't fact check me, but it's been a long time, right? Actually, no, it's been 60 years. So, but the idea is that the operating agreement should be reviewed and updated, annually
Yeah.
or semi-annually or every 2 years. And that allows you to have a discussion with your partner year over year over year, because 5 years from now, things will be different than they are today.
Right.
There is no doubt or question about that. And so it's about being on the same page. And what I'll say about having partners is that, could I have done it alone? I probably could have been successful alone. I
Yeah.
believe that I would have been successful.
I
Would we
do.
have been able to grow to 38 million in, under 6 years? Probably not. And the reason I say that is because I know what I'm very good at. I
Mm.
love idea generation. I love iterating on things. I love building things. And, I'm not afraid to roll my sleeves up and get in the mud. However, I have a really hard time getting started.
Mm.
A lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh, you got to be able to like start fast, go. And we have a lot of friends like
Yeah.
that, and I almost tease them. I love coming up with ideas. I have a really hard time getting started.
Yeah.
And my business partners have been a great complement to that, where they can just be like, "Hey, let's get
Let's
it
do
started." That's how
this.
Next Call Club
Yeah.
actually started. We were in San Diego a couple years ago for one of the carrier trips,
I was
and we had
there.
been talking and talking and talking and talking, and my business partner was just like, "Cool, man, I'm gonna go ahead and register the LLC and like go get a customer." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, just go get a customer." I was like, all right. And so I went and got a customer, and that's just how we got started, right? And then from there, it gets a lot easier for me to get moving. So this idea is that no person is perfect,
Right.
and if you understand your shortfalls, or where you have weaknesses, or you understand what you really do not enjoy doing,
Mm-hmm.
if you can find a partner that complements you
Right.
and you get along with, and you have mutual respect and trust, or partners, it works out really, really nicely.
That's
And so it's
cool.
now my partners are some of my best friends, so
Makes
it's worked
sense.
out it's worked out
You spend
beautifully,
a lot of time with them. And, you know,
for
one of
sure.
the things that like business owners, leaders that are solo, they deal, and I hear this all the time, they deal with like loneliness, having to deal
Absolutely.
with making decisions alone. No one understands. My wife doesn't understand. Husband doesn't understand. Friends don't understand. No one understands what I have to do because they're alone. And it's actually a
Yeah,
legit feeling, of feeling like I
absolutely.
have to make this decision alone. Now, I know one of you three have to make decisions that fall under your responsibilities, but how often do you get to lean on each other to where you don't feel that sense of like, I have to go do all this alone?
Constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, constantly. And I think there's been an interesting dynamic, I think, this year with it seems like in the last few months, we've been pushing and driving so hard, especially on the Next Call Club side,
Oh, yeah.
that we're all tired, right? We've all been building, we've all got a lot of balls in the air,
Hmm.
which just is very mentally taxing. Someone's buying a house, somebody is dealing with some parent stuff. I've been studying for security. We have a lot of things going on, right? And I can digress and talk about it, but it's been like it for the last few months. One of us is almost always out at some point. We're
Right.
constantly cycling vacations and picking up each other's slack because you got to take rest.
Right.
You have
And
to rest. And to your
you're
point
big on
about
that too. I know that. We talk a lot
absolutely,
about
yeah,
that. Yeah.
absolutely. And what I would say is that the piece about loneliness is so true, and I think especially adults in general, right? I think life happens. You end up having, whether you get married or you don't get married, you have kids or you don't have kids, but we grow up in a world where you're in public school or private school, you go to school every day, and then maybe you go to a trade school or a college, and then you're single and young and you're working, and you have all these people that are
Right.
friendships that I would call of convenience.
Mhm.
And
Oh, true,
what
true.
happens is you have a high quantity of friendships, but maybe not
The
a lot
depth.
of deep
Mhm.
or quality friendships. And you get into your late 20s, 30s, 40s, and you think like, what the hell happened? Like, I don't talk to me. I'm just kind of in my routine.
Yeah.
And so you have to be extremely intentional about relationships and friends. And I think that's one of the great things about our group that we talked about earlier, C8,
Right.
is that we've been in this group chat, and I feel like we all talk every day
Every
and
day.
have for like 2 years. And so the bond that becomes, or the bond that builds off that, it becomes very, very strong. And you have to be intentional. Like, you have to be intentional because, I mean, Kanye says it,
Yeah.
right? The top's so lonely, I,
It
you know? So,
Oh.
it is. And that's where these events where people come together, or networking, or even just building an audience online,
Mm. Yeah.
can be so valuable. The amount of conversations I have with agents just by posting on Facebook or LinkedIn consistently is amazing,
Oh, yeah.
and the community is there. So you've got to find your community, you got to find your tribe, whether that's,
Yeah.
in other business owners or other people within your industry or your church
Yeah.
or a
Local.
volunteer
Mhm.
group, or whatever. Just find your tribe and get out there and talk to people, because the world is lonely if you let it be
I
lonely.
I agree, and thank you for that great advice. And honestly, the story is
Absolutely.
good because
Yeah.
I want this podcast to be about people feeling like they know you, feeling like
For sure.
they're like, wow,
Yeah.
I feel like two friends are talking and they're just recording it, which is kind of like what I want the podcast to actually be about. But I also love that
Absolutely.
you're so vulnerable and you do share a lot of what you do, and that's what I've noticed is there are agents within this high performing world that we live in that are very like kept to themselves. They're like, you know what? I
Hmm.
can be your friend, but I don't really want to talk
Right.
business or shop with you. I want to keep that to my business, my shop. But I mean, one thing that you've done a very good job at, and it's actually one of my biggest convictions of leadership, is that I feel like I was called to help leaders become greater leaders than I in less time. And I feel like you and I share some very similar convictions. Are there any convictions that or values that you and your business partners, or specifically you, have brought into your business? Uh, yeah, like any convictions that have just really led
So
you?
So I think I'll start with the first one, and I think it relates back to what we talked about before with this idea of
Yeah.
loneliness or feeling alone or saying, "Man, I don't have a support group." Is get a therapist or get a coach.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
It's you can't be a great leader, or you can't be your best self if you're not your best self mentally.
So true.
And some people, therapy is going to work really, really well. For other people, coaching is going to work a lot better.
Right.
But the reality is it doesn't really matter what form you get it in. You need to have an unbiased person who can give you feedback and help you talk through
I
things.
agree.
Because we talked about this idea as like, well, my friends don't understand, my wife doesn't understand. The reality is they don't understand
Right.
unless they're in that business with you. And also, they don't want to hear you complain every day or every time you get together about all the struggles,
Yeah.
right? It's nothing, no, like there's a saying out there that says, and and you and I are entrepreneurs, but I think there's a lot of people out there who might not be. It says nobody hates your boss more than your partner or spouse. Nobody
So
hates your
true.
boss more than your partner or
So
spouse,
true.
because people go home and complain about it, right? So think about the gift you could give your friends and spouse by just having a coach or a therapist who you could talk about these things with. So the reality is, like, you've got to be healthy on the inside, physically and mentally, to be a healthy leader on the outside to help other people be successful. So that's the first one. The second one is that leaders need to pick their own people.
Right.
And so I talk about this a lot on a micro environment where I say, look, in our agency, in our organizations, managers hire and fire their own people. And, the first part of that is you don't want to force somebody on the manager. And I
I
can't tell you
totally
how many
agree.
times I talk to small
Oh
business
man.
owners who are always the final decision
And
maker
they have
on the new hire.
office managers, right? That never
Right.
make
They have
those
office
decisions.
managers that they don't empower,
Mhm.
and then that office manager says, "I think this person needs to go," and then the agent or the owner says, "I don't think we
Excuses.
should fire him," and all that does is diminish the autonomy
So true.
of that manager, and it demotivates them, and it basically says, "Why am I even a manager if I can't make these
So true.
decisions?" And I used to see that, in previous I mean, multiple places that I worked, in the insurance industry and not in the insurance industry, there would be a quote to your point, a quote unquote manager who didn't have really any decision making authority. Really what they were meant to be almost like a hall monitor when the manager wasn't around.
Right.
Hey, watch everybody and make sure that, either you can report back to me or answer a question if I'm not around. That's not a manager. That's basically like an executive assistant. And
Exactly.
and there's nothing wrong with being an executive assistant, but it's confusing to call them a manager for the person who's doing the job and the people that's working with
Yeah,
them. So
totally
leaders
agree.
need to hire and fire their own people. The other part of that is if you do not like a person that you lead or manage, I am in full disagreement when people say, "Look, we don't have to like each other. We just have to work together." Well, if you are their leader, you need to like them because if you
So
do not like them,
so true.
you will not be able to give them your best self.
Yep.
And there's that happens in the military, and I didn't serve, so I don't want to misrepresent
Right.
here. But I've read a lot of books by military leaders, and I remember in one of them they talked about that. I said, look, if you have somebody that's under your command and you do not like them, you need to get them out of your command into somebody who does like them
Right.
because that you cannot help them be their best self. So those are like the two main convictions, and I could go on and
Oh
on and
yeah.
on. I'm happy to give you more if you'd like, but
No.
those are like two really big
Those are
ones.
huge. And for every listener, you might want to rewind and listen to that again. Some great stuff. And Andrew, I've been blessed just like you to have worked with a lot of agencies over the last couple of years. And I mean, when I came to the industry from the corporate world, I
Mhm.
was blown away when they were like, I would interview people or meet agencies and I would meet office managers. And I would
Mhm.
say, so how many people have you had to fire? How many people have you hired? And like, if she listens, you've met her. Kathy is awesome. My
Yeah.
former
Yeah.
office manager. She is now director of operations. So completely different job because titles
Yeah.
don't always make sense either. And I sometimes want the title to actually make sense to what they do, not just some sounds
For
great.
sure.
But office manager was funny because when I interviewed her, I asked these questions and no knock on the previous agent, no knock on her. She has grown immensely because I haven't hired, I haven't made a final call on an employee in I don't know, 3 years probably. So I
Yeah.
have say, but I don't make final calls typically because we talked about things that we really enjoy. I have gravitated towards, as an owner and entrepreneur, I've gravitated towards the things that I like. And I've been blessed to have people that I delegate and can support the business and do roles that they enjoy. So as you know, I've gravitated towards the hiring, training of leaders in
Yeah.
sales, right?
For
So
sure.
putting Kathy in charge of customer service, payroll, HR, compliance, and then Rachel in charge of all the sales has led to me
Yeah.
just them having more autonomy, but also power, and not power trips, but power within their departments to make the decisions they deserve to make. And empowering them has led to them, remember, I say this a lot, and it's not my original, but I say it a lot. And this is what resonated with me that you were saying is that you got to be known, liked, and trusted. And I also say
Yeah.
they have to know, like, trust me. I got to know, like, and trust them in order for it to work because it's so true because I believe they had the like in the or the no down and the like with their previous agencies, but there was never a permission. I trust you to do the job of an office manager now. And I've entrusted
Yeah.
them. And through that trust, they have grown and we have grown as an agency. So
For
I
sure.
can't do it on my own. And that's part of it is like, even if you start a business on your own and you don't have business partners, co founders, you still need to find people that can help you grow. And it doesn't mean that you just grow Beau's business, Andrew's business. It means you have to help them achieve their goals, their motivations, personally, professionally, in life. How have you been able to pull out what not only your business partners' goals and personal and professionally, but maybe some of the people that actually do work with you?
I'm a huge fan of doing what I call development
Yeah,
meetings. And, I think that's just an extremely generic
it
term.
is.
And I imagine you've done these as well,
Mhm.
and you maybe call them something different, or maybe it's been,
Yeah.
what's the right word for this? It's been almost just kind of it's happened on its own,
Right. Yeah.
naturally. So I people sometimes ask me, "Hey, do you do annual reviews or do you do quarterly reviews?" And I don't. I think that the annual review or the quarterly review is one of the worst bureaucratic inventions forever. And I understand why they created
Right.
it, because if you have a massive corporation and you need to get feedback, especially if you are in an up or out environment
Mm-hmm.
like the military
Mm-hmm.
is, like consulting is, like a lot of tech is,
Yeah.
you've got to have a way to standardize and rank people. In a small business, it doesn't make any sense to do a quarterly or annual review. Development conversations should be happening all of the time.
All the time.
I'm reading this book right now with some of our junior leaders called The Coaching Habit, which is an amazing book. I actually have it
Love
on my
it.
desk right here for anyone seeing the video.
I've
It
not read
is
it.
one of the fastest
Coaching habit.
reads that you'll
Okay.
have. It's on Spot. If you have Spotify Premium, I think it's like a 3-hour audiobook. And the idea is it's all about asking questions. And, I thought when I read this, I'd be like, I'm just going to do this with the team. I'm going to teach them. But I've learned a lot too. And what I would say is that coaching and development should be a daily thing. However, you also want to make sure there's time for a formal meeting. And so I don't like the quarterly review or the annual review, because what happened? People go in, they think I had a great year. They say, am I going to get a raise? I'm going to ask for a raise. And it becomes this big thing, or this one time is, if I don't get it in this annual review, I have to wait until next
Yes.
year to talk about money or talk about whatever. And so what I like to do instead is I like to do a like quarterly or semi-annual development meeting with somebody who we know wants to
Mm.
grow. I haven't done these with the people I work closest with in a while, and I think that's a testament to the amount of trust I have, that they
Right.
can just be like, "Hey, Andrew, I'm feeling like I need more," and I say, "Okay, let's just talk about it." Right? It happens a little bit more naturally. However, when we were scaling the agency up, pushing the org chart vertical, installing middle managers, creating specialty roles, the development meetings helped a lot. And what we basically sat down and did was we talked and said, "Look, let's talk about development. We're not going to talk about pay today. We can talk about long-term vision, goals, what we want to do. We're not going to do anything with pay today. We will talk about money, but we're not making any decisions today."
Right.
And the general idea was to try and find, what are you interested,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to figure out what are you interested in that the company needs, and then asking the question is, how much money do you want to make and by when?
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a roadmap together,
So true.
and trying to say, you want to make this type of money by this date. Here's what you're interested in. Here's what we need. Let's come up with some projects or some education to try and get you some more money that makes sense from a business
Right.
perspective. And that does a couple things. One, if the amount of money they want to make is not
Mm.
realistic on their timeline, it is our job. I shouldn't say opportunity. It's our job as
To
leaders
educate.
to be honest
Mm-hmm.
about that and say, I don't think that's realistic. Here's what I think is realistic. And if that's not okay, like, let me help you find the next thing. The amount of trust you earn, not only from that employee, but the rest of the organization when you do that, is immense. Most of the time, what happens though is people think, wow, this person wants me to help achieve my goals. And you have to actually want to do that. It
Right.
can't be fake. And they say, if I can grow here, I'm going to stick around, because people leave because they want growth from a money or an educational
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. And so having those conversations early and often helps a lot, because somebody might say, look, I want to make another $10,000 in the next 12 months. And instead of waiting 12 months to say, all right, well, here's your
Yeah. Yep.
$10,000, you might say, wow, you did this project that made us 20 grand. I'm going to give you a $4,000 bump right now.
Done.
And it allows
Mm-hmm.
you to start giving bumps quicker, because you are looking for it. Your mind
Oh
finds
yeah.
what it's looking for.
So
So
true.
so that's the way that I look at, developing leaders. Is you need to have a lot of conversations. You need to be very intentional about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to make sure that, again, you're playing to their strengths and helping the business get what it needs. What you should not do
What's that?
is, somebody should not come to you and say, I really want to do marketing. And then you want to make them feel like they're developing, but
Right.
the business doesn't really need it. So you say, okay, you give them some frou-frou project. You realize it's a waste of time and money. Then you pull it away from them.
Ooh, that
That's
hurts.
incredibly damaging.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. So I love that I love when you answer the questions, you lay it out in detail of actually some actionable steps of what you do. And I love it because in our agency, we do some very similar things. And you and I are slightly different, but very similar in a lot of ways. And development and training is at the top of my mind all the
Yeah.
time because I do believe that there needs to be I always tell my staff this, like, what an open door to me means is that I'm asking you to tell me the truth. I want you to tell me the truth.
Yeah,
So many business leaders they don't want to know the truth. They want you to lie to them,
for sure.
make them feel good. I always tell them this. I have this saying, reprimand in private, praise in public. And I ask you, you want to poke holes in anything I do, anything I say, how we do processes? I want you to, but just do it one on one. I can handle it. I'm a
For
big
sure.
boy, but
Yeah.
I will never say, Andrew, you're late in front of everybody and embarrass you. Hey guys, let's not do what Andrew did. Let's listen to his call. He's horrible. He's a bad
Yeah,
example.
for
But
sure.
I want them to give that feedback openly. And I love that you said this because I truly believe it. And I used to say there was this invisible gray line for every single person where culture and compensation met. And then I realized by just being out in the world and talking to so many business leaders, actually three C's: culture,
Yeah,
compensation, career development. And when you have these conversations that involve all of that, you are helping the culture because people want to be heard. It doesn't mean that they want you to do everything they say or ask. They just need to know, does Andrew actually listen? And you know, I've talked a lot
for
about
sure.
this, like even me to where I'm at today. My biggest one of my biggest challenges is to still just listen to understand, not to respond,
Mhm.
just to
Yeah,
understand, slow down and listen. So when the staff speaks, I'm quiet. I might ask another question, might take a note, but I will say why, right? Like you said, why do you want to earn more money? I want to just know why. Why? Oh, okay,
yeah,
that makes sense. Well, why do you want more time off? Oh, why? And then it always finds
yeah,
there is a big why at the center of everything. And I do believe that the three C's keeps people in an environment that they can feel like they can achieve their potential, that they're heard, that they're around people that are like-minded through the culture, through
yeah,
compensation that can provide some personal goals that they have in their life and achieve those. And then the last one with career development is sometimes, believe it or not, listeners, people want to lead people
yeah.
because it feels good, because they feel like they were
That's
called to
absolutely
do it.
true.
It doesn't actually mean they want the job title or authority of manager and the extra pay that comes along with it. Sometimes they just feel like they'd be better suited helping other people achieve their goals. And by us, you know, holding them back, sometimes they stick around, other times they leave. Andrea, this reminds me of something. I want to
Yeah,
bring this up. You ever heard anybody tell you,
sure.
you don't want to do that? You don't want to be an agency and manager, Andrew. You need to stay
Yeah,
and be my CEO. Trust me. You don't want to do that. And they
for
try to
sure.
talk you out of it and tell you all
Yep,
this, you know, maybe true stuff, but all the bad, not the great risks involved. So,
right.
does that resonate with you a little bit? You ever heard anybody try to use that scare tactic to keep you?
Uh, I've absolutely heard that scare
Yeah.
tactic, and I'm sure you have too,
Yes.
and when somebody says that to you, what goes through your
Oh, I
mind?
can do it, and I want to show you I can.
Yeah,
Yes.
I well, now I
Yeah.
wanna do it
Yeah.
even more, right?
Yeah.
Like, now I
Yeah.
wanna do it even more. So, I think it's a really good point. It's you gotta you've gotta offer the opportunity, and I hear people talk about, "I want people to act like owners." People say it all the time. "I want someone to act like an owner." And the reality is, if they are not an owner, you cannot expect them
Oh
to
my
act like an
gosh,
owner.
dude.
And if you want them to act like an
Hmm.
owner, then you need to treat them like an owner and give them autonomy and input in decisions. You need to help them share in the profits or the bonuses that you get, or you need to help them become an owner of an agency on their own. If you are not willing to do those things, you need to stop asking people to act like an owner, because it's unfair to yourself to expect that, and it's unfair
So
for
true,
them
man.
to be asked that. And one of the things that you were talking about with leadership, that there's this amazing article out there. I don't know if I've ever sent it to you. I think I've sent it to some people. Is They call it wartime versus peacetime
Hmm.
CEO. It's an incredible article, but CEO is a loose term. I think you can look at it like leadership, and the whole point of the article is there's peacetime leaders and there's wartime
Yeah.
leaders, and that there's different. You need a different type of leader for a
For
different
both.
type of business
Yeah.
environment. And so, if you are in a huge cash crunch and your sales are down and the company is moving in the wrong direction, you might need a wartime leader who's a lot more aggressive,
Yeah.
a lot more of like almost like a dictator who's saying, do this, do that, do this, do that, to get yourself back on track. However, once things are smooth and you're rolling and you're doing great, that type of leadership does not resonate very
Mm.
well. That urgency can't you can't have urgency forever, right? You just can't do it. We're humans. We need to rest. And so that's where sometimes a peacetime
Right.
leader comes in. And
Yeah.
so I'll share that article
You
with you. And
should.
if you want to put it in the show
Oh,
notes,
yeah.
it's
I'll do
incredible
that.
because a lot of us, to your point, are one man shows,
Mhm.
or maybe we don't have partners, or maybe one of us are the leader all the time. And we can be both of those things. The
Yes.
way that we operate can be, a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more peacetime. And, I think that explains for me is that when we came into 2024, we had to change the strategy of our agency pretty substantially. So for the last 5 years, we've been on hyper growth mode.
Right.
And it's
I've
been
seen it.
about
Yeah.
hit this goal, hit that goal, hit this goal, hit that goal, and all these types of tight deadlines with hard goals. And we've been hard charging for a really long time. And then we started getting the machine built and things were good. So, like in 2022, you guys were joking. You're like, man, Andrew, do you even work? And I was kind of like, yeah, I work, but I travel a lot.
Yeah.
And it was because I had amazing leaders around me because we had built this machine. It was quote unquote peacetime.
Right.
Towards the end of last year and early this year, we had to change our strategy. Like retention dropped hard last year.
Oh,
Everyone's
yeah.
taking rate increases all over the industry. That puts a crunch on your cash flow, which means you have to make a lot of hard and quick decisions to get more efficient. And then last year we were focused on growth, but because we are disqualified from our bonus, which we used to fund that growth, we had to change to a profitability strategy, which was a huge change. And so for the first 2 or 3 months of the year, we were hyper vigilant on this
Yeah.
or that or this or that, being paying a full attention to everything. But now things are starting to roll again.
Right.
And it's like that reminder to myself that, like, hey, I need to chill out. I need to
Mhm.
back off.
Mhm.
I need to let the people do their job because they've done the work to make the shift and the adjustment. They've turned the ship, and now I need to let them sail. And so I love the article because, whether it's two different leaders or the same leader having a different approach, different leadership styles are important for different times. And I actually have a question for you, Bo.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Kathy and Rachel.
Yeah.
And you and I've talked about this a lot. And the reason I want to ask
Yeah.
you this is because I get asked this question a lot by other agents and business owners is people say, look, like, I don't know if I want to hire a manager or an operations director
Right.
or somebody to do all these things because then I have to pay them more
Right.
and I don't know if we're big enough to do
Mhm.
that. And I just don't know if it's worth it. And what I've said is that I feel a lot of that comes out of looking at your business as an extension of your bank account.
Mhm.
If you pay somebody more money, that comes out of your pocket. Whereas if you look at the business as its own
As a
entity, you say, well, it's not
business.
coming out of my
Mhm.
pocket. It's coming out of the business's pocket. So my question for you is, how has promoting and empowering Kathy and Rachel into these roles freed you up? And do you feel like it's been worth the money you've spent, and why,
Yeah.
if so?
Oh, yeah. So, thank you for asking me a question. I love the flip
Yeah.
of the role. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I want to start with something that you said too. My past leadership is about 14 years before I bought an agency, and about 4 years as
Yeah.
an agency owner, a consultant coach. I used to think that I owned and ran my last position
Yeah.
until I owned and ran a business. And I realized,
Right.
whoa, there was things that I thought I was doing as a business owner that I wasn't. I controlled
Yeah.
P&Ls, I made these decisions, and I didn't actually run it the same way I maybe would have here, but I will tell you this. I was uniquely my path was unique, similar and a little different from yours, but managing multi-million, $50 million business right before this with
Yeah.
600 employees led me to not feel like I had to clinch their money and profit so tight that I
Right.
couldn't say that I would let Andrew walk over 4 grand. Nowadays, you think about it and you take out a calculator, and I tell people all the time, like, take out a
Yeah.
calculator as a business owner right now. $4,000 divided by 52 weeks divided by 40. It could be, well, let's just take 4 grand divided by 20, 80. That's full time. $1.92 an hour times 8 hours. So $15. Andrew, if your best employee came to you, would you pull $15 out of your pocket and hand it to them at the end of the day, extra, knowing that they would stick around, they would be happy, they would continue to drive your business? People are
I
crazy
would
sometimes.
absolutely do it.
Now, I hope
I
my
would
I hope
absolutely
my
do it.
staff doesn't listen and say, "I want $15 more a day." But no, that's
Yeah.
when I know that they're the right person, those
Yeah.
things I am happy to do. Now, Andrew, I started in insurance and hired Kathy immediately. She didn't work for the business I started or bought. I hired her, put her into an office manager role day one. It was so hard for me in a
Yeah.
sense to say, I need to give up this dollar amount that I clearly have the gifting to do. But if I don't hire her, so some agency owners and then business owners go into a business to actually be owner operators, sole proprietors, right?
Correct.
I went into this fully thinking like, I want to scale and I want to grow and I want to grow
Mhm.
specifically leaders. So I know because of my fulfillment and the way that I find fulfillment and my giftings uh, are through leading leaders. And if I didn't have a leader, not only would I not be as happy, one,
For
two,
sure.
how am I going to scale on my own back when I got to sell service, bookkeeping, hire, fire, everything that an owner would have to do if they did it all alone. So I hired her day one, which I never got that money, meaning that I never took
Right.
it, put it in my pocket. I never got used to it. One,
Correct.
two, she led to me having the opportunity to focus on things I loved. And guess what? We were opposite. She was a little more
Yeah.
hard nosed and little iron fist in a good way. Good cop, bad cop
Yes.
feel some days, but overall, she took the operational side where I'm like big dreamer, like you were talking about. I'm a big dreamer, but let's do it
Yep.
today. And she's like, hold up. What about the details? Who's going to do that? So it just balanced so well. And I'm so thankful to God, to her, that I had her. But I'll tell you, if you're out there and you've thought about putting a manager or a leader in a role, one, just like you had to decide your co-founders, you need to make
Yeah.
sure that who you get into a leadership role, you're getting into business with. Their
For
character
sure.
is what I look at the most. Okay, not just their leadership, but if I'm giving her credit cards and access to personal information, is his character in a position that can handle that responsibility? And if not, it would ruin my life. Could ruin my life, could take all my
For
money, could
sure.
run me into a lawsuit. So I would tell other people that I went into this to scale and lead leaders. So for me personally, I wouldn't have been happy without them. I'm thankful because you attract who you are. And we created a
For
great
sure.
business and we attracted Rachel to come work for us, which Rachel was also one of those, she'll hear me say this, quote unquote office managers that didn't actually make the decisions that because the agent made them for her. So she came in as an individual contributor and didn't want that role originally. And I said, promise you, if you come in and you work hard, I will spend so much time developing you into the leader that I need you to be, but more importantly, that you deserve to be, so that other people, I believe, Andrew, if you want to change the world, business owners got to be better leaders and find better leaders, because we can
Absolutely.
impact our employees' lives in the life of their families and friends dramatically, not just our customers, but the people that work with us more than almost anybody else out there. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. I talk about that all the time. It says it doesn't matter where you land on the political spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, it's we have control of like our own little mini pod, right?
Yes.
We can make choices around how we compensate people, right? Like we don't need the government to say, "Hey, there's a minimum wage or not." We can establish our own minimum
So
wage
true.
in our agency. Hey, nobody makes
Less.
less than this in my agency, and so we have the power to choose. And I think people sometimes focus, and I don't want to get into a political rant, but I
Right.
think sometimes people focus so much on what's going on out in the world, the things they can't control, instead of what they can control or the impact they can make. I'd rather make an incredible impact on 5 people
So
than make
true,
a
man.
minuscule impact on 500 people. That's my
So
opinion.
I actually think about this sometimes, is that we love insurance, we love people more, was my mantra.
Mhm.
That's it. It was in a business plan. I thought it sounded good. When I was in my past
Yeah.
life, I don't know if I ever told you this. You want to know where it came from? I used to walk into the stores that I was responsible for and I'd say, "Hey, Andrew, what's up,
Mhm.
man? We love auto
Yeah.
parts, but we love people more. So I need you to go out there and
Yeah.
show them that you know your job and you have the knowledge for auto parts, but you like them more.
Yeah.
So you're not just trying to sell a part." Okay. So I
For
took
sure.
that into this, right? But with that line that I've been so thankful to trademark, with that line now, it is a filter still. How do I show? How does me and our staff show that we love customers more than insurance? But how do I also turn around and show Kathy and Rachel and the rest of the team that I love insurance and what they sell, but not more than them? and that I wouldn't pick
Correct.
them, the sale over them. So it's actually led to this like abundance mentality that I've created. And I don't have an abundance of money and resources, but I believe that if I lead with an abundance mentality or a culture of generosity, it's bled to my managers, to my leaders, which is bled to the rest of the team. And they understand that Beau is so invested in us. When we lose, Beau's already lost. He's invested so much
Correct.
emotionally,
Yeah,
physically, spiritually, financially into us. When I win, and they know when they win, it takes them winning consistently for the business and myself
for
to
sure.
win. But I just love that our two leaders have come together, man. And I spend one on one with each of them. And then we come together once a month and really spend a lot of time together. And I just am so thankful. If you're thinking about putting a leader in your business, I think this may sound stupid to say, I don't know your business, but it might be dumb not to, because
I agree.
what you might sacrifice short term will never come close to what you could achieve long term on your own. And I have just loved having people around me that just have that drive for zest for life and achieving great things. And they drive me. I get on, I think I'm motivating them, and then I'm done talking. I'm like, man, I feel jazzed up. And I really love that. So what a good question, man. I really appreciate
Yeah.
you know, that you care that much to think about a great question and ask. I appreciate that. It means a lot.
For sure. I wanna build on your point about not putting a manager in might be a mistake, and I wanna give 2 tips to people who are maybe on the fence who are gonna do it. One is start looking you need to be looking for managers all the time. Who is somebody who can be a future leader? Who is demonstrating your values and the culture of your
So
business? And
true.
if you see somebody demonstrating those things from a place that does not have
Hmm.
authority, they're leading by example, they're leading from the front, even though they don't have a title
Oh
or
yeah.
authority, that is a huge green flag to say, look, let me pull this person and start having a development conversation with them. Be looking for leaders and start developing leaders before you need those leaders. Because when you need that leader, you're going to have multiple people
Yes.
who are able to step into that role. So that's the first thing. The second thing is avoid the landmine that I see so many leaders who are trying to develop more leaders take is you have to be willing to let people make mistakes. And I know that you do this with your team a lot is when people go into a manager role, we see them make the same mistakes that every manager that we've ever developed makes. And it doesn't matter how much we warn them or say, hey, if you don't do it this way, this is kind of what could happen. And it's kind of like touching the stove or sticking your finger in the electrical socket. It's we learn by experience, and we talk. I almost like joke in like the entrepreneurial space and with like hustle culture. Everyone says, "Oh man, like the
Uh,
more you fail, the more you learn. Fail forward, fail upwards, right? Fail. You're not failing, you're learning."
yeah.
And we all believe that about ourselves when we say, "Oh yeah," and I think in some ways it's a coping mechanism because when somebody that they are working with fails beneath them, instead of saying, "Oh, that's how you learn." They're failing forward, they're failing upward. What do? They go back and they latch on and take the responsibility
Sure.
away because they've
Latch
messed up.
on. Yeah.
And and if you understand that people are going to make mistakes and they're going to make failures and that the way that you react to those mistakes or failures will be so crucial in their development that you get to decide if you handle that mistake or that failure as a learning opportunity and handle it with and give them grace and say, hey, here's how it happened, here's how we avoid it from happening, or saying, hey, what's something you could do to make sure this doesn't happen again,
Hmm.
right? Put it back on them to figure it out.
Exactly.
That is going to build trust and autonomy, and they're going to say, wow, I made a mistake, I was so nervous, I was so upset, and they handled it so well.
Right.
Or you could take the responsibility away, or you could overreact, in which we all do sometimes. We can overreact, and then people start saying, "Oh man, I'm afraid to make a mistake. I'm going to hide that
Hmm.
mistake." So, as people think about to your point of if you say you can't afford not to develop leaders, make sure that you're treating others the way that you yourself would want to be treated if you
It's
were
my
being
biggest pet
developed.
peeve, man, is to be the leader that you
Yeah,
wanted or needed or would need, and
correct.
to treat people any less than you would want to be treated in their role is just, it's ridiculous. And honestly, I'm telling you right
For
now
sure.
that that's probably one of their biggest hangups, is that people have less patience than they ask for their staff to give with them. As a leader, we make mistakes all the time. I have to ask forgiveness. I might get a little aggressive at
Absolutely.
times, defensive, and I don't mean to. And I actually am pretty good at those things. But when I do mess up, I want to make sure they know I'm sorry and that I can do better,
Yeah.
because then it gives them the permission to do the same thing. But I also have to, when they make a mistake, give them the same grace
Right.
that I would want to give.
Correct.
So, or would want to get in the same situation. So
Yeah.
I totally agree in this like world where the leaders now here's some advice too I wanted to add on that I had a thought real fast is
Sure.
that
Yeah.
some people, if you're listening, you're thinking, I need to find that kind of leader and hire them. Now, it's not so easy to just go find a leader that just because you hired them and interviewed them that they somehow line up with everything that you do. It's not going to happen. You need to be able to train and develop those people because, Andrew, I said you attract who you are, but one thing that I say a lot is that eagles want to fly with eagles. So if you think you're going to go find this high level leader and you're not really an eagle, they don't fly with pigeons. So you have to work
Right.
on yourself through, like Andrew said, therapists, coaches, leadership training. If you want to lead great leaders, you have to be the best version of yourself. So if you're the best version of yourself, you can lead people and you don't have to wait 6 months till you're a better leader. But you have to be honest with yourself when you hire somebody that I'm going to be working right now. So, Andrew, I appreciate you coming on today. Is there any
Absolutely, man.
advice that you feel like I just didn't pull out of you today that you want to leave for soon to be leaders, current leaders,
Sure.
even, people who've been a leader for a long time?
Yeah, I would say the number one piece of advice I could give is to ask for help. It's you mentioned earlier there's some agents who want to keep a low key. Sometimes that's just a personality trait that just say, look, I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want to be out there sharing. Other people don't share because they're afraid they're going to lose their edge, which I think is crazy. There's absolutely competitive advantages, but most of what we do that makes us successful are not a secret. I mean, the reality is like 95% of what we do is already out there, and we just have to execute on it and have the discipline to stick to it. So I'd say ask for help. If you see an agent or another business owner or a professional or really anybody, honestly, any type of leader that you admire, reach out to them and just say, hey, like, you know, I really admire what you've done. Do not say, hey, can I pick your brain?
Ugh,
Because what that signals is, I want something from you. So if you admire somebody, be like, hey, I really admire you. I've listened to your podcast, Beau, and I really liked what you said about this. Would you be open to spending 15 minutes with me? I'd just love to meet you and ask you a few questions and see if I can get your advice on
right.
something. And I think if
Good
you approach
advice.
somebody like that, they say absolutely. But if you come in and say, hey, can we jump on a call? I have an opportunity. Or they say, hey, can I pick your brain? I immediately think that's you want something from me. And now I have to think, do I have enough free time to have you pitch me on something or ask me for something? And I try to help people as much as I possibly can.
Same.
You cannot help everybody. The best way to help everybody is to put yourself out there, right? I try to post on the LinkedIn every single day, Facebook a couple times a week. So, what I always tell people is if you want to follow me more, if you want more advice from me, follow me on LinkedIn. If you message me on LinkedIn, you will get a response. If you message me on Facebook, you'll probably get a response. But I also have a few free resources out there. I have a newsletter I put out monthly. I was
Great,
doing
great
twice a month,
newsletter.
now monthly. I try to share a ton of things that are working for me, try to pull back the curtain. I'm always taking, you know, suggestions on what to write about. And then I also have our compensation plan for our agency out there online
Sweet.
at, you can go to www.nextcallclub.com
Perfect.
forward slash 2024 dash comp plan.
Cool.
I walk through the why behind it. Compensation plans are super important.
So,
And so that's it. Ask for help, whether that's from me or anybody else you admire. Ask for help. You might be surprised how much help you get.
that's great advice because one of the last things that I'll say to tie that together is that so many times people hear this advice: go surround yourself with people that are better than you, greater than you. Don't be in a room where you're the smartest. And it's like a lot of people are like, well, I'm new, I'm starting. How am I going to get in a room where I'm not the smartest if everybody's smart in that room, they won't let me in the room. So the advice that Andrew gave is huge. Thank you for giving that. And
Absolutely.
one of the last questions I always ask is, how do they connect with you? And you just gave us Next Call Club,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Facebook. Is there anything else we're missing? I will add to show notes. Everybody listening will be able to check YouTube and the podcast platform to be able to get connected with you. Anything else you want to leave them with on how to connect with you? Newsletter, anything like that?
On how to connect with me, no. I think the last thing I'll leave you with is like one little sound
Yeah.
bite onto the point that you just talked about with, you know, be okay with being the smartest person in the room. Just make sure you're not always the smartest person in the room. it's okay to want to be around people more successful as you. Just don't pull the ladder up behind you, right? Be the person, to your point, be the leader that you needed. So as you continue to move yourself into bigger, better, smarter, more successful rooms, be the most successful person for people who need to be around other
Right.
successful people. So that's it. Thanks so much for having me,
Hey,
Beau.
thank
Had an
you.
awesome conversation as always.
So fun,
So
man. I really appreciate you. And everybody that's listening,
likewise.
if Andrew left you in awe and you want to get to know more about him, check the show notes.
Yeah.
Also, do me a
Yeah.
favor, like, turn on your notifications, put a review for this podcast, but also share this podcast with all your friends, family, coworkers, because if you learn something, maybe they will too. Andrew, I really appreciate you. Thank you, my friend.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you for everything.
Thanks, man. All right. Thank you.